Hey, everybody. We've got Elon Engineering, Oracle Obfuscation, and some emerging tech in Miami. You're watching Techstrong Gang. We'll be back in a minute. Hello, everybody. We're back, and we got a jam-packed episode for you with lots of things that are happening late last week that we're going to discuss today. But our guests today are some of us are the usual suspects, but two of us are maybe not in the spots that we normally are. But let's figure all this out as we go along. John, how you doing? You are at home again?
I'm at home. I'm here. I'm near Oracle. I can see it right across the way.
Still master of all you survey in the West Coast there in the Valley?
I try. It's kind of foggy though, and a little hazy, so I'm not seeing very well today.
All right. Then coming down to Florida, Chris Blask is on his boat once again. Chris, how are you doing, buddy?
I am good. I'm in Key West, more or less. Had the Blue Angels flying 100 feet overhead this weekend. Life is good.
All right. You see any pirate action down there while you're looking for boats?
Every day. All the time. This is pirate heaven. The Boca Chica Channel, if you're local enough. Yeah, this is pirate world.
All right. Stephen Foskett is joining us once again from Ohio. Stephen, good to see you as always. How are you?
It is great to be here on this beautiful day. Thanks. And really glad to be sharing the stage with Chris, somebody I see but don't always get to interact with.
All right. There's always a new experience here on the gang somewhere. Speaking of new experiences, Bonnie Schneider is joining us. She's still in Boca Raton. She's just in a smaller studio for us today and working remotely because Alan Schimmel, who's normally on this show for us, is, well, on his way to London, where I am at the moment. Bonnie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks. Great to be here in Boca Raton and connect with everybody on the show from all over.
There you go. And I, of course, am in London here for the KubeCon Cloud Native Europe show is this week. We'll have more on that on tomorrow's show. But today we're going to get started with some weirdness that's going on involving, surprisingly, Elon Musk, who sold X to his AI company. I guess the premise of this thing is that somehow or other the X data is going to be used to train the AI Grok engines that he's building over there. But I'm scratching my head a little bit about the amount that this went for, given what they previously valued X when it was known as Twitter. John, what's your take on what's going on here? Is this actual engineering or what we call financial engineering?
I think it's the latter. I think it's financial engineering. But then again, it's Elon Musk, who was our fearless leader in terms of Doge. So I guess, there's a theme here. And we could even apply OpenAI in the end. But if there's a theme here, it's consolidation. So he's consolidating, essentially, merging together X, AI, and X. And he said it was a $33 billion deal. These numbers, to me, are just kind of bizarre. In a sense, he's saying that this combination of the two companies is going to value XAI at $80 billion and X at $33 billion. He bought X for $44 billion a few years ago, and basically it's kind of lying in ruins. So he's decided, in a sense, like he did with SolarCity and Tesla, he's going to combine these companies and properties and try to create some sort of synergy between the two of them. As you said, Mike, Grok has been trained off of X for a couple of years, actually. They've used data from XPost to train the model since 2023. And the idea also is to continue not only to do that, but the X platform would also distribute the XAI products and continue to get real-time feedback from users, their thoughts, their screenshots, their data. What's interesting is that this happened a few weeks after this bizarre, nearly $100 billion acquisition attempt of OpenAI, who Musk is at war with. That was a very bizarre nonprofit or for-profit debate that's ongoing. There's so many moving pieces in all this, which makes it a little bit kind of hard to understand or believe the numbers here that are being bandied about. While all this is going on, by the way, we've got these two companies merging at a time when there's yet another report at the end of the week that OpenAI is on the verge of raising another round, an incredible amount of money, $40 billion. But part of the contingency of that is that the company transitioned from nonprofit to for profit in order to get all the money. So again, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of money at stake, a lot of chutzpah and chest puffing by Musk as usual. And again, he's just kind of roiling things. He's kind of playing games. He's antagonizing OpenAI as he always does. It's just an Elon Musk playbook action.
Well, let me ask you a quick question about it. Where do those numbers come from? I mean, who decided that?
Oh, he just tweets them out, and this is what he does. This is what he does. This is what he and his buddy in the White House. And I won't get. I'm not gonna channel Allen right now, but I'm
I
gonna
thought you
say
were.
that they right they throw these numbers out. So let's go back to the $500 billion for Stargate. Remember that we were laughing at that number in terms of the AI infrastructure. I read a book a couple of weeks ago by Bob Woodward called Fear, which was about the first couple of years of the Trump administration. And in that book, Trump says he loves round numbers, and the number he loves the most to throw out is $500 billion. So I think Musk's just kind of using the same tactic, just throw around. Here's 30 million, 50 million. I'm surprised he didn't say he bought the company for 40 million or 50 billion, 40 billion or 50 billion, what he said Friday. So take it for what it's worth.
Well, I think the numbers are very, very specific. So there's $12 billion of debt and $33 billion purchase price. Now, purchase price, in other news, I sold my car to my house at $1,000 over what I bought it for, and therefore I'm a financial genius. No, in reality, he sold the X Twitter for what is it, $1 billion more than he bought it for. I think that this is all about protecting those investors that went with him into XAI and basically allowing them to show no loss. Even though obviously, like we said, Fidelity values X Twitter at 12 billion, or it did last year, and it may be more or maybe less now. But the number, that $80 billion and the $33 billion and all of that is about those investors that went in with Musk to back him on this, and he allows them now to show on paper, at least, that they haven't lost money. But of course, they haven't lost money only if XAI is worth $80 billion. And so that's the question we should be asking.
So there are two things, just really quickly, Stephen, that I'm glad you brought that up. There are two things that really remain murky. We don't know how investors would be compensated, and we don't know the role the X leaders would play in this new company, whatever it's called. I guess, is it called X? Is it still XAI? Who knows? But there hasn't been any comment for X or XAI. I don't know. I always feel like this is like a game of three-card Monte to me at times. I'm just being cynical about it because this guy is pushing the boundaries of reality at the last few months.
Who would assess that whether or not or AI is worth $80 billion, though? I mean, would that be someday going public kind of money, or how does that number come to be?
I guess that's what it has to be, right? It has to be an investor, whether it's the public markets or a private investor that wants to fork over that kind of money. And basically, you just kick the can down the road so he doesn't have to answer that question for another few years.
Oh, well, how government-like. Bonnie, sorry, I cut you off. What are you
Oh,
going to say?
no, I was just thinking about all the users that are on X and if they're aware of everything they put out as training, XAI. I just wonder how much transparency there is with all that and how, let's say, the cohort of people on X, their opinions are going to affect, the AI model. There's a lot of unanswered questions in those areas.
Yeah. What's even more confusing to me is that XAI recently raised $10 billion in a funding round that valued it at $75 billion. So again, I just see these numbers, and there's a little bit of a lack of consistency for me. But also, Bonnie, you're right about this idea that your data, if you still use X, is being used to train these models. I mean, in a sense, I guess if you use X, you understand that it's wide open territory at this point, right? There's no content moderation to speak of. It's kind of a Wild West mentality. So, use it at your own discretion and see what happens.
Right.
So where do I send the bill for entering my data into X for training Grok? Because ultimately I'm doing the work for this, am I not?
Yes.
I mean, you guys are, talking about the finances. I'll see if I can think about the technical fundamentals, right? So X, as we all know, I think is a cesspit, right? And we know that training AI is on bad data. You all remember, what was it, 10, 15 years ago, when the first AIs, took the internet, trained themselves, and turned it into, you know, fascist loons. Um, and as you're saying, the transparency in the actual finances, what is this transaction all about? I think as an external interest, whether I invested in it or not, it worries me. There's fundamental flaws. So I think the only way that I can see, practically, if this, is that XAI actually worth what people think it is whether or not there's a big enough market selling disinformation, AI generated disinformation, because that's the fundamentals. It's a sloppily put together, untransparent AI play fed with data that is widely, I believe, to be heavily influenced with bots and garbage and nation state influence campaigns. Doesn't sound like
Other than that, it's great. Steven, what are you thinking here?
So here's the thing. You guys are never going to believe this. You'll never believe what happens next. I'm going to take the argument that it is worth it. I'm going to take the argument that this thing is greater than the sum of its parts. So think about it this way. It's not about training Grok. Grok 3 is great. It already is one of the top LLMs. This is not about that. Think about some of the recent news stories that we've heard. When Goldberg was trying to validate the Houthi PC small group chat, what did he do? He watched. Where did he get that news? X. This is about mining X for real-time information so that it has a demonstrably better chatbot than anyone else. And you know what? I think it's going to work. I'm not going to argue that this is necessarily worth $80 billion, because the actual dollar figure is based on magical mystery buyer math. But what I will argue is that X plus XAI, as long as they don't have a mass exodus of users, and frankly, they haven't had a mass exodus of users yet, and with all the crazy stuff that's happened so far, I don't expect that that's going to start happening now. This thing could be actually a transformatively different AI experience, because it has its finger on the pulse of the global consciousness in a way that no other platform can. And I am not a Musk fanboy by any means. I am not an apologist for this. I am as mad as anyone about this, but I am also looking at it and thinking, you know what? This makes incredible sense, and this thing is going to be amazing. Can you imagine being able to ask a, a chat assistant literally, like, what is the opinion of Trump in Canada right now? Or what is the opinion of Marine Le Pen in France this morning? And having it give you a correct and concise and nuanced answer to that question is something that no other company can offer. And frankly, I think something that makes XAI potentially worth as much or more as OpenAI. And if we're going to say that OpenAI is worth about $100 billion, XAI is too.
If OpenAI gets that at $40 billion, it'll be worth $300 billion. But you're right. I think you're right, Steve. I think you're onto something, because I was looking at this, trying to figure out what these parties bring to one another. And I think your reasoning is actually very, very accurate. I think it does bring a lot of value to what was left of X. I think it revitalizes X in a major way.
I might argue that X is only interesting as a news vehicle as long as it is the official voice of the United States government. But the minute that changes, X is not so interesting. So, I don't know if X is the dominant news vehicle for all things, including the latest news out of the Yankees, for instance, or for anything that's coming out of the stock market. So, I'm a little dubious about saying that X is going to be this great vehicle for staying current, because I think there's other mediums out there that might do a better job with a broader set of content that, to Chris's point, is not full of a bunch of people spewing hate and all kinds of noise that would, shall I say, skew the results of my Grok output.
In our modern world where nothing matters but people's opinions, owning X and combining X with a chatbot, in my opinion, is the equivalent of owning AdWords and AdSense and the Google algorithm. It is just a really differentiated thing. And yes, you're right that there's a lot of loons and nonsense out there, but frankly, almost every other thing you can think of publishes first on X and appears first on X. Yankee news, well, I get all my Red Sox news, unfortunately, from X via my favorite blog because I don't log into X. But almost everything, almost all the news they report comes from posts on that platform. And it's the same with hobbies. It's the same with international news. You know, how did we find out about the earthquakes in Myanmar? We found out about it through X. It is globally, it is a platform. And frankly, let me say one more thing. There's one company that can beat XAI at its own game, Meta. They've got just as good information. They've got just as good AI. And I want to see what they can do with this once they see what Musk is going to do with X.
All right. I want to be clear here. Did you just express an opinion as a fact that we were supposed to just nod our heads on, or that's an actual opinion?
I don't know. I'm just opinion. We're all just opinionating here. Opinions, that's my reality, and I reject your reality. That's how life works.
It
these
sounds like
days.
X right now.
You're so 2025, Stephen. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna have to just wait and see what Elon does next with this whole thing. But don't forget, there's Microsoft is out there with LinkedIn, and there are other players in this game. So I think other people will be looking at this same playbook. But we'll see what happens, folks. We'll be back in a minute.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey, folks, we're back with another item that we're not entirely clear what's going on about either. It seems to be a trend these days, but there's the cybersecurity community is in something of an uproar over some breaches that may or may not have occurred in the Oracle cloud infrastructure. And I guess the issue is that there's 6 million of these records that may have been exposed, but Oracle is not copping to it, at least not yet. This might be one of those stories that's a work in progress. But Chris, this being your space, what's going on here? I mean, it would seem to me it's pretty straightforward. Either they were breached or not breached. Everybody seems to think that they were. And why is Oracle kind of not just kind of saying, yeah, these things happen? I mean, frankly, they seem to happen every day.
Yeah, I think this one is a tale of two transparencies, right? In one inbound and excusable, and one outbound and honestly not, right? And the first one, how do you end up having a vulnerability, linger around your system for a long, long time? That takes me to my favorite topic of the day, supply chain security. And, what does it actually take for any organization, even a big one like Oracle, to keep track of all of that and execute well? Right. And that's cybersecurity as we know it today, which consumes all of the time and budget of companies everywhere. And there are huge gaps all over the place. We know it all the time. So something like this, yeah, I understand. Right. And maybe there's a fault, somebody involved in not dealing with it earlier. But again, that's normal because it's been too difficult to have transparency into where everything comes from. That's what all of this software bill of material and stuff has been about. And it's, and I think you may be able to trace this directly through the SBOM lineage, but it's really not about that. It's, is it possible? Has it been possible logistically, economically to keep track of everything? No. All right. So this stuff happens. The other half is what makes this a story. right? I firmly believe, as a corporate actor, who spent my entire career, almost my entire career as a commercial vendor, I've made a lot of public statements, and own it. Aren't a little extra of it, right? I think as an organization, you're better off saying, yes, that was our fault. And if your coffee's cold, maybe that was us too. Here's what we're going to do. Move past it. Defend and deny is not a reduce customer problems, increase customer satisfaction and retention sort of thing. And obviously, somebody at this corporation thought otherwise and issued a statement that makes it necessary for us to have this conversation.
John, you're just down the road from Oracle. Is there something different about the culture there when it comes to this stuff? I mean,
You read my minds. You read my minds. I'm just thinking when Chris was talking, how Oracle has a history of bending the truth or just evading. One of the running jokes I have with a very good friend of mine works there. She's a lawyer. She used to handle PR for Larry Ellison. She doesn't do it as often, but she would tell me, "You're never going to get a direct answer from me. I'm always going to give you a no comment, whether it's right or wrong or indifferent, or if I don't even know the answer. I'm always going to say no comment." And I think part of the culture there is just kind of deny and evade. And the one thing that jumped out at me about this that was just like galling was the cause of the data breach is thought to be a previously known vulnerability that has existed since 2014, and yet Oracle is in deny mode. I mean, that is so classic of this company. And it's been a reputation. I'm sure you've come across this, Mike, and everyone else, is that for years this is a company that is never quite trusted by those in the Silicon Valley area, like Ellison in particular. He's fast and loose with the truth. And when I read this, I was not surprised in the least.
when I think about this, and I wonder if somebody it could be what you're describing, but I also think Oracle goes out of its way to kind of say one of its differentiators as a cloud service provider is that it is more secure. I don't think anybody believes them when they say that, but maybe they do, and so they don't want to cop to it. But Stephen, I know you've been kicking around this Oracle Cloud thing for a while. What is your sense of what does differentiate Oracle in the cloud, and are they any different than anybody else?
Well, to be honest, all of my experiences with OCI specifically have been pretty positive. I have to say that I know a lot of the staff over there from previous companies that have presented at Field Day, and OCI has presented at Field Day. We've been on site across the water there from John with the company, and I've been pretty impressed by the crew that I saw over there. And frankly, I- I'd be one to buy into the fact that maybe it's a little bit more secure, a little bit more enterprise, a little bit more solid than some of the kind of fast and loose cloud competitors. But that being said, this sure looks damning. And assuming that it's true, now, as Chris, I'm sure, would know, it is possible for somebody to create a fake breach. That happens a lot. If you watch some of these things, people will sometimes put together a breach to polish their own credentials or something like that. But the details of this are, in my opinion, a little too specific and a little too credible to say that this is a fake breach. So assuming that it's a real breach, I feel like it just shows kind of the world that we live in where, one little chink in the armor is enough for somebody to sneak an arrow right through. I am a little bit surprised, but not surprised by the Oracle reaction. It reminds me of what reportedly Ray Cohn taught Donald Trump, deny, deflect, delay, and don't write about it. That's exactly what we're getting here. And, what is reality anymore, right? It's just, that's just like your opinion, man. You say that we were hacked. We say we weren't, and that's just really where we're at. And I don't want to live in that world where a company can just deny, deny, deny and hope it goes away because it looks like it's real.
I mean, my favorite Mark Twain story is a one pager, right? And the story is there's two little boys, well, a good little boy and a bad little boy. And the bad little boy grows up, marries well, gets rich, and dies happy. That's it, the end. And you can read that two ways. The way I've always read that is just because you see something work doesn't mean it's a bloody good idea, right? And I've been the vendor with vulnerabilities and breaches and so forth. And in as much as I've ever had a say in it, we've taken, the embrace the suck approach, right? Okay, that was us. What is the value? What is the benefit? And how do you actually, I know quantifying risk maybe a little easier for folks is what is the benefit of goodwill and trust in the market? I don't know, but I have sold billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of gear, and I was sold it that way. So this may be working for Oracle, John, as you say. If they, I frankly don't have to pay that much attention, but they've gotten that sort of reputation. Apparently, they've earned it. If they're still in business, happy day for them. But I go back to Mark Twain. Just because it may work for someone doesn't mean it's a good idea. Maybe you would make more money if you didn't do that.
John, back in the day, they would say the cover up is the thing that, winds up doing more harm than the actual incident. But going back to our earlier conversations, it seems like a lot of companies are taking a page out of the social media playbook, which is just to deny until everybody forgets about it.
Exactly. Move on to the next shiny object. I wonder where they learned that. But the interesting thing is that the company that was upfront and direct about their security flaw. Remember last summer, was the one that the CrowdStrike is in a sense the playbook. It should kind of follow what they did. I thought, in a sense, they didn't suffer as much in the long run. Even in the short term, the pain wasn't as bad as everyone thought it would have been because they were so upfront and direct about it. And the one thing also I was going to throw out is the irony about Larry Ellison was he was, when he was talking to the press, a tremendous interview. If you asked him a question, he pretty much would tell you the truth and like to see the eruptions going on around his PR staff and the other executives. In a sense, he couldn't help himself at times in that respect. But in terms of the corporate side, and I'm actually talking more about Oracle's corporate side, there was always the deny, deflect. They were always at odds with all the other major tech companies in the area because they would play fast and loose with things. There were so many incidents. It's kind of like almost a kind of a weird dichotomy between Ellison, who would just blurt stuff out, and then the corporate side, which is so overly cautious. It still is incredibly overly cautious to the point where even if they know something, they'll just deny it. And it just creates so much mistrust and animosity between them and a number of people, not just the press.
So what is your best advice then to the folks who might be victimized by this and not know it because, well, they don't get an official notice from Oracle? So how do you know that you're, got an issue here or do you just assume now that all your data is at risk and start acting accordingly, Stephen?
Well, I don't want to be cynical, but I would say that this smells truthy to me. And I would suggest that if you are part of this breach, maybe you need to take some actions to protect yourself. And frankly, if you're using OCI and are not part of this breach, maybe you should think about it as well, because it looks accurate. And if it is accurate, this is a pretty big one. And it also shows, for me, the big takeaway here is that the company was using really out of date software with known vulnerabilities to store passwords and other information. That's not great. And that's going to make me question whether this is a platform I trust.
Mm-hmm. Chris, is there something security people specifically should be thinking about here? Because if they do go down to the folks who are managing the Oracle cloud environment, they might say, well, Oracle told us it's not an issue, so go away, because they might side with Oracle.
I'm trying to think of something to add. If you're on the front lines actually doing the work, increase your diligence, right? Maybe expect you've got problems anyways. At the highest level, this strategic level, yeah, I think Stephen, you said it so right. I would, even John Wolf, right? I would have less faith in this. That means something. And everybody, I can't repeat enough. Just because you have done security things doesn't mean you've secured your business, right? Any security effort may not have worked. Have a plan. So this may be a silver line of this. Maybe some organization will say, hey, we actually don't know what would happen if it turned out this wasn't actually breached. Maybe we should have a plan in case it is. And maybe it is now.
I will go a step further. And everywhere you've heard in cloud security land, people are talking about cloud security is a shared responsibility. Well, Al is not here, and I'll just call it what it is. Bullshit. security is your responsibility because when push comes to shove, those guys aren't going to be there, and that's all there is to it. So you're on your own. All right, guys, we'll be back in a minute.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. Well, recently I had the chance to go to Miami to the Emerge Americas conference, and it's one of the largest tech conferences in the region, especially in Florida. Fascinating amount of people that showed up from all over the world. So I wanted to do a really quick recap on the conference and also share an interview that I did with the CEO of Entanglement, which is a quantum computing company. Over 20,000 attendees representing 60 different countries are expected here at Emerge Americas in Miami. From health tech to fintech, AI to quantum computing, at this conference, all eyes are on what's next in technology. Joining me now is Jason Turner, who is the CEO of Entanglement, and we're going to be talking about one of the hottest topics here at this conference, quantum computing. Jason, it's great to have you on.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Now tell me about quantum, because it's one of the most popular tracks for this conference.
Yes, quantum computing and quantum information science is really magical. I mean, it's something that has been in the works for many years, and it's just starting to make some good progress. So quantum computing deals with qubits and not binary bits, ones and zeros, which is what our phones and all the computers do today. And that qubit allows to get so much more information from it. And then when you entangle and put lots of qubits together, you can solve massive problems at once. So in binary computing today, we're asking multiple questions until we get an answer. In quantum computing, you ask all the questions at once and get the answers. So that's why it's so much faster. I call it multidimensional computing, and it gives new next generation capabilities to solve and give insights that you can't get today with existing computers.
So what are you showing here?
So some of the things that we're showing here are entanglement. What does entanglement look like? And then the other things, we're showing a QUBO formulation here, which will work on a quantum system. So it's not just quantum inspired, it's quantum ready.
So have any mathematicians stop by and say, hey, I know what that is?
I haven't been here that much to see, but you can see what we've put in terms of special constraints, like, quantum ready and QUBO being together. We can solve over 1 million variables, fully connected variables with QUBOs today, which means we can discover things like material science and new molecules. It's really insane, all of the amazing things we can do with this technology.
As I mentioned, quantum computing and AI, I would say, was the top track at this conference. They seem to have the most amount of speakers. And another area that was also very popular there was defense. There was quite a few people from the military with different technology for that as well. And then, of course, you also had universities, particularly those, I would say, from the Southeast, although Northeastern up in Boston had a booth there. And they were showing their innovations in programs like robotics with some really cool demonstrations that I got to see. So it really was cutting edge on in terms of what's next in technology and climate tech as well. And I'll be talking about that in a couple more interviews here on the Techstrong Gang.
Bonnie, what was the mood and the caliber of the folks that you met there? Because, to be honest, Miami sometimes also has a reputation for being the Bitcoin processing capital of the world. And there's a lot of folks involved in that business who are perhaps not always as fully legitimate as we would like. But it sounded like this conference was pretty much, a standard tech event, bleeding edge. What's going on here?
Yeah, and I would say with, A-list talent as well, they had, Damon John from Shark Tank, the musician Armando, who's known as Pitbull, who's not just obviously a famous musician from Miami, but he's a very successful entrepreneur. He gave the keynote. Clem, Dulang, who is one of the founders of Hugging Face, spoke. You might recall I interviewed his colleague Thomas Wolfe. So they had some major A-list, I would say, people in tech and in entrepreneurship speaking, and that did attract people from all over the world. As I mentioned in the video, there were 60 different countries represented. They had an Israeli tech area designated for cybersecurity, for example. I spoke to a lot of people from South America, Chile, and as well as Italy had a booth in Spain. So it brought an international mix of people. And apparently, according to their statistics, this was the largest one they've had since they started in 2014. So it was all well-known companies were represented, but also a whole bunch of startups. And some of them you heard of, some of them you may not have, but many of them had connections to South Florida, and they were in fintech a lot. I saw quite a bit in healthcare. Digital health was a very big topic, and some major physicians and hospitals were represented in those spaces as well. I've been covering this now for 2 years, this conference, and I do see the growth. And I also see the shift in what tracks are popular going from year to year as well.
Stephen, we talk about emerging technologies a lot on this show, and I'm trying to figure out, has there been a change in mindset? Because it used to be we would distinguish between leading edge and bleeding edge. And what is your sense of what is the appetite for leading versus bleeding, and other folks who are like, call me when this thing is super stable in 2 years?
Well, I'd say that when it comes to money, especially to the financial markets, everybody's looking for the next big thing. I know that that sounds cliched, but I think that what people learned from the dot-com boom, from the social media boom, from the AI boom, is that these booms happen, and there is an incredible amount of money to be made or spent or set on fire in these booms. And I think that that's exactly what we're seeing here. There's sort of a suspension of credibility when people are thinking this could be the next big thing. And quantum certainly is. I mean, Bonnie, you talked to the CEO of Entanglement. That's an interesting company because essentially nobody in quantum actually has any productive, practical product that uses quantum. And yet what they're trying to do is they're trying to use quantum inspired technology in a number of areas, including threat intelligence and tuning AI models and things like that with their subsidiary companies. I think it's an interesting spin, if you'll put a pardon the pun, on quantum to try to figure out ways of making productive use of this technology. And I think that a lot of people are still holding their breath and waiting for the moment that quantum actually delivers on the promise, even though that hasn't happened yet. So, uh, yeah, I think people are looking for the next big thing. I think that's why they have conferences like this. And I do think that there still is a lot of credibility around quantum that says maybe this could be the next big thing.
Mhm. John, to Stephen's point, do the folks at Quantum just have a AI envy essentially, and they're out there?
Yeah, until they become the next big thing. It's interesting, but there's over the last several months, right? There have been some advances or some interesting concepts of Microsoft around quantum. So it's been a while, but I mean there is some progress. The interesting thing is before the NVIDIA keynotes, they had a roundtable that included Pat Gelsinger, our friend from Intel, and he didn't really want to talk so much about NVIDIA's news. He wanted to actually talk about quantum, and he's a big proponent in the next couple of years of like some sort of breakthrough. I mean, he moved up the timetable. So it's interesting that Bonnie was at this conference where, you assume there's going to be a lot of hype over AI, but the fact that quantum is actually being not just whispered about, but discussed openly more frequently is a sign of like some sort of momentum, right?
Mhm. And yet here I am in London, and I walk down the street and I turn the corner and I'm standing in front of the IBM building. And in the window of the IBM building is a allegedly a quantum computer. And I asked myself, well, given how much these things cost, what is it doing in the window? Because it was kind of like dress up for IBM, and it was part of felt like more like a marketing campaign than I would see on Fifth Avenue selling, fashion or whatever. Then I was kind of like scratching my head, I thought these things were super complicated and hard to build. So what is it doing in a window of an IBM building in London?
Well, that's why they used to call it the glass house, right? Because they would, you show off your mainframe in a glass facility right off your lobby, so that every visitor could come in and say, "Ooh, that thing's cool." Was it one of the ones that hangs from the ceiling? Because those are cool.
Yeah, when they had like gold kind of wiring all over, it was very classy. I was like, it could have been Art Deco.
Also, at the nobody will ever need more than 640K line, right? And I think Moore's law was sort of a little stale maybe for a decade or so there, right? We get faster and faster and bigger things, and it doesn't matter, right? Just there's no practical difference whatsoever. And the AI and all this stuff, there's this scaling up in the dealing of everything may actually, to Don's point, maybe that's, maybe we're getting to the point where we actually need to crunch numbers at the scale that quantum implies. So I'm not market analytics in the space. I don't know what spin, is going to be the one that catches first for what company. But yeah, maybe this is the time. Maybe we finally need to actually have that much of a job in processing.
All right. So, John, if AI is worth, I don't know, $400 billion round number, quantum, what, 800? Pick a number. Or is
Oh
this
yeah, of
anybody's
course.
guess?
I'll channel my inner Musk or my inner Trump. Oh, at least $1 trillion. Yeah. No, I don't know. I have no idea. These number. I mean, when I look at OpenAI and its market valuation, if it gets its round of funding, and then kind of just juxtapose its actual revenue, it's just always a very, very kind of maddening exercise. It's like mind blowing at times.
Stephen, I'm deeply concerned that we are losing the quantum race to China, and therefore we should call the government up and have them pour in, $9 trillion to fund these companies. What do you say?
You're not talking to Trump, are you? Because the Q Act is just waiting to happen. No, I could totally see I could definitely see in accelerated investment based on fear of loss of quantum supremacy, and we'll see if that actually goes anywhere. I mean, ultimately, nobody knows if this technology is actually going to be practical yet, and we're just waiting for it. It's like nuclear fusion. It's been around for a while. It does exist. We just haven't been able to find a practical use that beats conventional with it. But if we could, set the world on fire. Oh,
Yeah.
literally.
I mean, to your point, somebody seems to show up about every 3 weeks after some quantum announcement going, hey, well, yeah, by the way, we figured out how to do that using conventional computers at a third the cost, right?
I just wanted to also mention an interesting aside that wasn't included in the interview, that I asked Jason Turner, how did he get into quantum? What attracted him? He's been in it for 10 years now or more. And you know what his background is? It's kind of interesting. Music. That's what led him to quantum to computing and working with music on videos and things like that. It's just an interesting backstory, to see how someone gets into certain types of technology. Just want to add that.
All right. Well, given the money conversation, I can't help but wonder if someday will our money be in two places at once? Can that be done with quantum? Because well, we get
Oh,
we
that
get
that sheer scale thing again. I think of the music background, right? I have lifelong best friend musician. We have a music studio together at home, and it's fractal, right? We talk about digital music, and we took all these analog curves and turned them into ones and zeros, and it's been good enough. We had CDs and so forth, but that's not how any of this works, right? And quantum, as I said during, a minute ago, right? Just the sheer volume of all the processing, which really hasn't been a deal. I mean, we keep making things faster over the last decade or two, but our user experience and what we're doing is about the same, right? But in my supply chain work, I'm out constantly talking about having systems where I, as an operator, wherever, can see the contract language representing the relationships between every organization in my supply chain, all the way back to, somebody taking a shovel and pouring sand in a furnace to make, the crystal to make a chip out of, right? And what does that actually take in sheer processing? Um, so I think, yeah, music might be as logical a place to come from, because we are still, to be clear, in the eyes of our grandchildren, when they're our age, with stone axes, chipping data out of purest, information foam, right? We've barely begun.
All right, folks. Well, I will tell you, I love emerging technology. It has been great to cover and a privilege for the last 30 plus years. But I will tell you, anytime some VC shows up with some valuations that are in the Carl Sagan billions and billions kind of numbers, be suspicious. Hey, guys, thanks for being on the show today. Good to see everybody as always. We're going to have an awesome lineup behind this. Techstrong Gang content will continue for the next several hours. We invite you to check it all out. And of course, you can now find it on the web through your favorite social media channel. And of course, now through various apps that we're going to be providing it through. So by all means, check them all out. We'll see you guys next time.